Good evening. We are ready to finish up the bird. Well, we got a lot of birds to go, but we'll make our way through today's birds. We are sponsored. We're sponsored by Daf Yomi for this week by Shmuel and Miriam Fuchs. Nishmas Miriam's father Henoch Ben Yaakov HaKohen Zichron Levracha's yahrzeit is on the 7th of Kislev, which is tomorrow night. Which
is my birthday.
Okay, also your Hebrew birthday, good. Daf Yomi for the week is sponsored by Ryan and Tali Bernkopf, Lili Nishmas Tali's grandfather, Mayor Zev Ben Yitzchak HaKohen Zichron Levracha, whose yahrzeit was on the 5th of Kislev yesterday, right? And so, let's get ourselves started. We have to run our way into the middle of this one. Here we go. So, we were discussing that we had an argument about whether or not you could change an ola into a chatos. And Rabbi Yeshua seemed to be of the position that if you had an ola and you did it like a chatos, completely like a chatos, it turns into a chatos. And we said, well, but wait a second. We have all of these mishnayos in kinim that are very confusing and seem to not be that way. And we seem to, as there was one that said, for example, that if a woman gave birth and then she wanted to bring 2 olos besides, so what she's supposed to do is bring 3 olos and 1 chatos. The Kohen didn't know. And so what he did was he brought 2 above, 2 below, and we discussed that which ones would be acceptable, which ones would be not acceptable, but it comes out that what they don't suggest is that one of the birds that he does below is acceptable because you turned the ola into a chatas. We didn't suggest that as a possibility, and why not? If after all, Rabbi Yeshua holds that you can do that. Okay, so now we were going through this lengthier Mishnah, which discusses a series of cases. And the whole point of it is that we're going to get to eventually a case towards the end, which is going to where Rabbi Yeshua is going to indicate that although these Mishnayos seem to indicate that you cannot change an ola into a chatos, Rabbi Yeshua is going to agree with that anyway, which seems to imply that you cannot change an ola into a chatos, which is where our question comes from. So we had case number 1, right? And we'll run through our cases fairly quickly, right? The lady was supposed to bring. She decides that she's going to bring. She has to bring her regular offerings, a chatos and an ola, and then she pledges 2 olos as well. The Kohen messes them all up, and so as a result, she has to bring another ola. Now, if it came out that she was going to that since we know that the birds have to be the same type, if the birds that she had brought were not all of the same type, we wouldn't necessarily know whether the one that was messed up was a dove or a pigeon. Hence, she has to bring 1 dove, 1 pigeon. Okay, that was the first 2 cases. Then we had a circumstance where she specifies. She says, "My olos are going to be pigeons, or my olos are going to be doves." Well, then she forgets what she specified, and then they bring the korbanos. Now, if they bring the korbanos in that circumstance, now she's got to bring 4 types because we don't know, right, what she was supposed to bring. We don't know whether her olos were acceptable, and if they're not, she's got to bring 2 of each type in order to satisfy whatever her vow was. We don't remember what the vow was. Okay, that's where we're up to. We're up to the next case. Kava nidra. Now, she makes things more complicated. She says that I am going to attach my olos to my obligatory vow. Now, this was a little bit of a complicated case, because what does that mean when you are going to attach your olos to your vow, what to your obligatory offering? The answer is that not only am I bringing my obligatory offering, but I am going to have an additional 1 ola, which is going to attach to my other 2 olos. And now really basically I'm bringing 3 additional birds. That's my plan. So I'm going to bring my 2 obligatory plus an additional 3 olos as my offerings. Now, what happens is, right, so now she also specified that her 2 that she was supposed to bring were going to be of a certain type. She doesn't remember which type it was. And now, because of that, and the Kohen doesn't remember which ones he did or which ones he did not do, so which one he did above. So now here's our issue, okay? The 2, so Kav Anidra, she established and set a connection between the birds and her obligatory offerings. Tzricha shetavi od chamesh predin. lemala mimin echad umi beis. So then she's got to bring an extra 5 birds, as long as all of the birds that she brought were one type. Right? So if she brought all the birds of one type, so then what we have to do is we have to say, well, we don't know whether the birds, the olos that she was supposed to bring, were of the correct type that she brought in the end, because we don't know whether they did the olos or not. So now you're going to bring 2 more olos of the dove kind, 2 more olos of the pigeon kind, and that extra ola that she promised that was going to be of the same type as the other two, that she said was going to go along with the other 2. She has to bring that one also, because we don't know whether that one ever came together with the other 2, because those 2 might not have been valid. So she's going to wind up with 5 extra sacrifices. Umi beis minin. Now, if all of them are of different types of offerings, well, now you're going to have 6. She's going to have to bring 6, because she's going to have to bring, we don't even know whether the bird that she brought was going to be able to be paired off with the chatos that she otherwise brought. So now she's got to bring a dove for that and a pigeon for that. Then she's going to bring in her additional offering. Then she's got to bring 2 of each type, so 4 plus 2, and that's 6 birds. Now, next, nisnana lekohen ve'eno yodas ma nosna. She gives over to the Kohen. She has no idea what she gave over. Okay, it gets worse and worse and worse, right? Halach HaKohen, the Kohen goes along, ve'asa, and he does the birds, right? He does all these birds. Ve'eno diamas, he doesn't know which ones he brought above, which ones he brought below. So nobody knows what happened, okay? So now you've got a big problem, because you've got a circumstance where you don't know if anything was valid. So you say, well, no problem, just bring everything all over again. Well, you can't, because it's quite possible that the chatas that she was supposed to bring was valid. And if the chatas was valid, then she needs to bring a ola to correspond to that existing chatas. Because you cannot, once the chatas is valid, you can't undo that. So that chatas might have been a dove, might have been a pigeon, which means you have to bring an ola or a pigeon to correspond to that one. It could also be that the chatas was not valid, in which case you have to bring another chatos, which is 3. Then you have to, as we always have been saying, is then she's got her pledge, which we don't know whether it was doves or whether it was pigeons, and we don't know whether whether the Kohen even brought them above or below. So she's got to repeat and bring 2 doves and 2 pigeons. So therefore, tzricha daled predin l'nidrosh. She's going to bring 4 birds for that pledge.
She forgets again.
Ushtayim l'chovasa, 2 more, as the ola that needs to correspond to the chatos that may have been brought properly, may not have been brought properly. The chatos achas, and she's got to bring 1 more bird as the chatos in case the bird was never brought as a chatos. Okay? Ben Azai says, beis chatos. Ben Azai says, well, you actually have to bring 2 extra birds as the chatos, because he feels not like when you establish, let's say that we said 1 chatas because maybe the chatas wasn't valid. Well, we never said what happens if the ola was valid and the chatas has to be of the same type. The reason we don't say that is because the chachamim hold, if you have an ola, that doesn't matter. You can start again with the chatas. The chatas establishes what the 2 types of birds have to be. But says Ben Azai, not true. Once you establish one bird, the other one has to be the same. So therefore, it could be one of the olas was valid, in which case the chatos has to be of the same type as that ola, so you better bring 2 chatos as well. Then you got to bring 2 olos because you don't know whether the chatos were valid, in which case you have to bring 1 of each as well. And so therefore, you're going to wind up with 8 birds. That's right. So Rabbi Yeshua says like this. Rabbi Yeshua says, very interesting. Rabbi Yeshua's answer, and this is why we brought the whole thing. I ran through the cases a little bit fast. Because Rabbi Yeshua says, and this is the point for us, we'll do Maseches Kinim one time. Well, anybody who really wants to do probability and math, it's great. It's great Masechta, but it hurts your brain. If you really want it, it's like an IQ test. The whole Maseches Kinim.
Lose your brain after that.
Amar Rabbi Yeshua says, Zehu sha'amru. This is what people say. Keshu chai kolo echad. When a ram is alive, it makes 1 sound. Right? It's like a bash sound, right? That's exactly, there you go. So that's the sound that a ram makes. Keshu mace, but when it dies, kolo zayin, it makes 7 sounds. And it has 2 shofros. It has bones that they can turn into flutes. It has the sinews that turn into a heartstrings. You can make out of some other place. You make drum out of the bladder. So basically, there's a lot of musical instruments you can make out of this animal once it's dead. So basically, It's a stitch in time saves 9 is essentially the English phrase, right? That's what we say. Basically, if you had done it right in the first place, she could have gone with 4 birds. Because she messed up and didn't know what she did and the coin messed up, now she's got to bring 7 birds. So plus the 4 that she originally brought that were not good. So she winds up with 11 birds because she messes up. Now, Amar Damar Rabbi Yeshua. So the point that Rabbi Yeshua makes here is that none of the chatoses are valid, right? Why are we not supposing that at some point in all of these cases in the Mishnah, we had an olah that was brought as a chatos, and we said that wasn't going to be valid. We had to bring another olah. We had to bring another chatos. But why is it that you have to bring another chatos? Isn't that chatos turned into a chatos? It's fine. So the answer is Rabbi Yeshua doesn't seem to agree with himself. So the answer is Amar Damar Rabbi Yeshua la'afuka midei me'ila l'meisek le'lechova mi'amar. So we have to correct ourselves. When Rabbi Yeshua says that you can turn a olah bird into a chatos, he doesn't mean that it really becomes a chatos in the sense that if somebody owed a chatos, it would be valid, like this lady who has a chatos to bring, and they take her olah and bring it as a chatos. We can't say it's valid. Why? Because she has an obligatory offering. It's not supposed to be a chatos, and you brought it as a chatos anyway. What we're saying is that if you had an olah and you turned it into a chatos, and then somebody came along and ate it, that wouldn't be a violation of me'ilah, because that's a valid enough offering. As we have done what we talked about at the beginning, we have such a concept of a korban being valid, but not counting for the sake of its owner. And that's what's happening here. The olah got changed into a chatos, which makes it valid enough that the kohen would eat it, it would be fine, he would not commit me'ilah, but not valid that the lady who was supposed to be bringing that chatos is acceptable. And that's the distinction. Next Mishnah. Kol apsulin shemalku malika son psula ve'eno metame bebeis habliya. Any kohen, or let's say not kohen, any of the invalidations, anybody who's invalid to do service in the Beis HaMikdash, let's put it that way, anybody's invalid to do service in the Beis HaMikdash, that does malika on a bird, the malika is puzzle. Right? It's not like shchita, that somebody who's non-kohen can do shchita. A malika has to be done by somebody who is kosher to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. But ve'eno metame bebeis habliya. But if somebody eats the bird, it's not a nevela. Nevela means an unslaughtered bird. And the rule of a bird that has died without being slaughtered is that when you swallow it, you become tameh. That's the rule by kosher birds, right? If you have a non-kosher chicken, that's Purdue. I don't know what they have the non-kosher chicken that's in the supermarket here, right? But if you take a non-kosher chicken, you eat the non-kosher chicken, you're tameh mitame bebeis habliya. Okay, so that's the rule. This is malika. It's not shchita, but he says the Mishnah, malika is serves the purpose of shchita, and you're not invalidated. Malak bismol. Let's say you do malika with your left hand. The kohen does with his left, and we know all the yavot has to be done with the right hand. Oba lailor, he does it at night. We know all service is supposed to be done during the day. Shachat chulin bifnim. He does shchita on a non-sanctified bird inside the Beis HaMikdash. V'kodshim b'chutz, or he does shchita on a sanctified bird outside the Beis HaMikdash. Also, those are invalidated, the psulim. Einon mitamos bebeis habliya. Those also are not going to create a circumstance where you are going to be tameh. The bird is not nevela. Malak bisakin. If he does malika with a knife, what's the difference between shchita and malika with a knife? Right? Malika is from the back, right? Stabbing it in the back of the neck. Shchita is cutting from the front of the neck. So it's not, stabbing it in the back of the neck is not shchita, right? So if you do malika with a knife, right? Malak chulin bifnim, if you do malika on unsanctified, you take a chicken and you do malika on a chicken inside the Beis HaMikdash, the kodshim b'chutz, or you do malika on a sanctified bird outside the Beis HaMikdash, torin shelo higia zmanan, or you take a dove, we said it had to be or a pigeon, sorry, we take a pigeon, we said the pigeons had to be older. If you take a young pigeon, ubnei yona she'avar zmanan, or you take a dove that's too old, sheyav shagapa, or they have dried up wings. Right? We say that there's no such thing as a mum by birds, but there is such a thing as having a limb missing. And having dried up, shriveled up wings is the equivalent to having a limb missing. So it's an invalidation of the offering. Shenismis eina, or its eye is missing. Again, it's not a blemish, that's missing a limb. Veshenakta aragla, or its leg is cut off. Mitame bebeis hablia. In those circumstances, that death of that bird, that is invalid, and so therefore it's nevela. And if you swallow any of the meat from that bird, then it's mitame when you swallow it. Ze'aklal. Here's our rule: kol shepsulo bakodesh. Anything, and we're going to have to discuss what this means, right? If something is puzzle in itself, meaning by something happening to it, so then eino metame bebeis hablia. So then it does not become tame bebeis hablia. So, for example, the bird itself is kosher, but the service that you do is invalid. Like, for example, the left hand, or you did it at night. All of those were circumstances that you did the wrong thing, but the bird itself was fine, right? The service was not fine. So then that is not going to make the bird tameh bebeis habli. It's not nevela.
Or do it behind closed doors.
What do you mean by behind closed doors?
Because you're not a chef behind.
Oh, you're talking about shchita, right? Yeah. But we're talking about malika. Malika's worse than shchita because malika, normally I can't just do malika on a chicken, right? I can't get away with that. This is a rule by korbanos. Nevertheless, even though the malika is not done in a valid way, it doesn't ruin it from being able to be eaten.
Did you ever read the pigeon books to your kids at night? You know what I'm talking about?
I don't remember the
whole
pigeon.
Series of books about pigeons.
Oh, there you go.
Talking pigeons.
This is basically, we have flashbacks from this Gemara. Lo haya psul bakodesh, if, however, it's psul, right, is not by the is not bakodesh, meaning the bird itself has a problem. If the bird itself, like its eye is missing or the leg is missing, then we said metame bebeis hablia, then it's going to create tuma when you swallow it. If malika was done to it, even a kosher malika done to it, it's not going to help it. Okay, that's our rule. Now says the Gemara, Amar Rav Shmuel. Shmuel says v'layla ein metamen bebeis hablia. So he says that.
Small.
So what I said Shmuel. Sorry.
Yeah.
Amar Rav. Rav said. Let's start again.
Yeah.
Amar Rav. Small v'layla ein metamen bebeis hablia. If you do malika with your left hand, or you do it at night, it does not make the bird tummy when you swallow it. Okay. Zar v'sakin. But if you have a non-kohen, or you do malika with a knife, metamen bebeis hablia. That is going to make it nevela, and it's going to be tameh when you swallow it. Maishna small. Why left hand? Why is left hand less of a problem? That left hand you do malik with your left. Why is that less of a problem? The answer is de'islei hechshera b'yom HaKippur, because sometimes your left hand is valid for service. On Yom Kippur, you've got to take the spoonful of incense and you've got to take a shovel full of coals. Well, you only have two hands. So your incense you can hold in your right hand, and you're going to hold the coals in your left hand and walk into the Holy of Holies with it. So sometimes the left hand is okay to do service with it. So therefore, the left hand is clearly not that big an issue, so therefore it's not going to create a problem if you do malika with it. The laila, and what about nighttime? Isleh hechshera be'evarim upedarim. We burn the organs and we burn the limbs of each korban overnight on the mizbeach. So also nighttime's not that bad. Right, so we're basically saying if it's not that bad, it's not a kosher. The korban is puzzle, but it's not metame bebeis hablia. It doesn't become nevela, right? It doesn't become tuma if you eat it.
I understand what Rav is saying. Did the Mishnah just say?
Yeah. Yes.
Saying the opposite of the Mishnah.
So Rav says small and Laila don't. Now it says zar v'sakin. Now the Mishnah does agree with that. The one thing that Rav, I think he's saying the same thing as Mishnah. The only thing he's adding in the knife. Right? Sakin is not was not clear. It says sakin mitamas bebeis hablia. Right? He says shach b'chulen mitamas molak b'sakin molak b'chulen b'fnim kachim b'chutz torin shlegia. All of those are mitame bebeis hablia. Right, so he does say that, right? Zar is not there. That's the one, not sakin. Zar is not there, right? A non-kohen is not there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's going to be the point that they're going to discuss on the bottom. Okay, the other three cases, Smol, Laila, and Sakin, are there, and he doesn't disagree with them.
I guess I'm just mixing up Bizarre with Psulim.
Yes, Zar and Psulim. So that's what we're going to discuss. What are we including? What does it mean when it says Psulim? That's the Gemara that is upcoming. Good. So now. Zarnami islay hechshera b'shchita. So why is a non-Kohen that big a problem? A non-Kohen is acceptable for shchita, right? We know that you can do shchita. A non-Kohen can do shchita. So shchita lav avodahi. That's not a proof because shchita is not even a service, right? The shchita is okay with a non-Kohen because it's not a service. Velo, what do you mean it's not a service? From Reb Zera said shchita's para bizar psula. A para duma needs a Kohen to do it. And it must be, if you need a Kohen in a paraduma, it must be a service. Therefore, when you say a non-Kohen can do shchita, it's not that it's not a service, it's just that it's not required with other korbanos, which means that a zar is acceptable in some circumstances. So, machvi Rav Allah. So he says, and he brought him a proof, Rav brought a proof on this, he said, Elazar vechuka, right? The pasuk says that Elazar had to be the one who did shchita. In the pasuk it says Elazar HaKohen, he was the one who did the shchita on the paraduma, and then it uses the word chukah, and we had learned before that whenever the word chuk is listed in any of the services, it means that it's required. So Elazar, who was the Kohen Gadol, is required, who was a Kohen, is required, right? He wasn't the Kohen Gadol, right? But he was a Kohen, he's required to do the shchita by paraduma. So shani para. No, para is different because dekache bedek habayisi. Para duma is not a korban. Para duma is a upkeep service from the Beis Hamikdash. Meaning, we're doing the para duma in order to get the ashes, in order to be able to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. We're not sacrificing and getting an atonement through the para duma. Velo. So, and if not, kol dekain hu kache bedek habayis bokuna kache mizbeach mi boy. He says, isn't it a kal v'chomer then? If you're going to tell me that I need a Kohen to do even an offering that's not even a sacrifice, for sure that I need a Kohen in order to do it by a sacrifice, right? For sure I do. Sacrifices are more important. So Amar Rav Shisha Brei Rav Idi. Rav Shisha, the son of Rav Idi, says, no. The reason why I need a Kohen is Idi Deravidi, Midi Dehava Amaros Negoyim, Delava Voda Hi'ubay Kahuna. Look, we have other things that require a Kohen's involvement that doesn't make it a service. For example, somebody gets tzaras, they have to go to a Kohen and he's got to look at it. Seeing a Kohen looking at tzaras doesn't make that an avoda. That's not a mizbeach. That's not a korban. That's just something a Kohen's got to do. So too, shchita by the paraduma is not a service. It's just that it's something that the Kohen's got to do. So it doesn't prove. So therefore, shchita is not a service. Okay. So therefore, we don't have a circumstance where zar is acceptable, by a non-Kohen is acceptable. V'neilef mi bama. So why don't we learn from bama? A bama, before they had the official mizbeach in the Beis Hamikdash, then people could do sacrifices on their own. Well, if they were doing it on their own, they didn't need a Kohen for that. Which means a non-Kohen was acceptable by a bama. So therefore, why don't we say that a non-Kohen is acceptable by Malika? Because a non-Kohen is acceptable by a bama. So the answer is mi bama lo yalif. Can't learn from a bama. Bamas are a whole different set of rules. You can't learn from a bama. Velo, what are you talking about? Tanya, we learned in a brisa. We used bamas in other places as a proof for source for things. Here's a brisa. Minayin liyotze shim Allah lo yered. We have a rule that certain invalid things, once they're put on the mizbeach, they don't come down. They go up, they don't come down, because even though it's invalid, it's not that bad. So therefore, once it goes up, it's worse to take it down. Okay? So certain light level invalidation. Now, if it's completely a disgrace, then it goes up, you take it down. But what makes it a disgrace? What makes it not a disgrace? The answer is, if we see that such a thing is not invalid in another circumstance, then we say, okay, it goes up, it comes down. So, therefore, we have, what happens if I have the meat of a korban, and it leaves the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash? We said that the Kohanim are supposed to eat kodshei kodshim in the Azara, in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. What if it leaves the Beis Hamikdash? So it's puzzle. Let's say somebody didn't realize, they took that meat, they put it on the Mizbeach. Im ola lo yiri, it goes up, it doesn't come down. Why? Because sharei yotze kosher b'bama. Because when it came to Obama, not Obama, but when it came to a bama, right? When it came to a bama, then we allowed it. There was no curtain, there was no courtyard, right? It was outside wherever you were. So therefore, clearly that was acceptable to put. You could put that meat onto a mizbeach. So too, therefore, meat that goes outside of the azara can still be put on the mizbeach. It doesn't come down. Okay, so you just said you couldn't learn something from a bama, but now I am learning something from a bama. So which is it? So Tana azos toras ha'ula samech lei. He says that Tana is not learning it from a bama. That Tana is telling us from the pasuk that says zos toras ha'ola. This is the rule by an ola, which means that any ola, even if it leaves the confines of the Beis Hamikdash, it can still be brought up on the mizbeach. So therefore, it's not really from bama, even though the Mishnah, the Brisa says it comes from bama. We were using that as a hint to be able to remember the rule, but that isn't why. It's a gzeres hakosov. The Torah says that anything part of the ola, once it goes up, it doesn't come down. That's the rules. But generally speaking, we don't learn from bama. Therefore, since we don't learn from bama, so therefore a zar was never acceptable in any circumstances. Therefore, a zar who does malika doesn't count for anything, and the meat is mitame bebeis abliya, makes you tummy if you swallow it. For Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan says, Zar, he disagrees. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with Rav. He says, Zar ain't mitame abeis abliya. If a Zar does malika, it does not make it tame in when you swallow it, but sakin mitame abeis abliya, but a knife does. Knife does. If you stab it, so then that does. So, okay, so now, Tanan, let's take a look back at our Mishnah and see if what Rabbi Yochanan and what Rav says are jiving smoothly with what we just said. Kol psulin shemalku malika samsula. This is what you were noticing, right? It says in the Mishnah, anybody who's puzzle, who does malika, it's psula. So bishlam ala Rabbi Yochanan. So I understand what Rabbi Yochanan's saying. Kol, what is it? Who's everybody? Lasu yezar. That means azar is puzzle, can't do it. The malika is no good, which means it's mitamei beis abliya. Okay, el Rav, but according to Rav, this is what you were bothered by. According to Rav, kol lasu yemai. What are you including when you say all the psulim? Who's all the psulim? If it's not azar is okay according to Rav. So who's everybody? So lav lasu ye small v'layla. Maybe he's coming to include your left hand or at night. No, you can't say that because small v'layla behedjiktani. Read the next lines. That's written right in there. It says left-handed and nighttime are acceptable. That's clearly specified. So the answer is Tani v'hodar mefarish. This is the style of this Mishnah. The Mishnah says something that's vague, and then the next sentence explains what it means. All these things that are puzzle are going to be okay for Malika. Then the Mishnah says, and what are those things? Left hand nighttime. Not the zar. Zar is no good. Rav is going to learn our Mishnah. That feel better? Yeah. Okay, good. Toshma. Here's the rule. Here's what we said. The end of the Mishnah, though, still bothers us. The end of the Mishnah says, Zehaklal. Here's the rule. Kol shahaya psulo bakodesh eno mitame begodim abeis abliya. If the psul is in the animal itself, so then it does not make it tameh. Then there's no tuma bebeis abliya. Meaning, the animal was kosher. So I keep saying it backwards. The animal was kosher. The service is not good. So then it's not mitame bebeis abliya. So bishlam and Rabbi Yochanan. So fine. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it's kol asu yezar. So this is coming to tell me that this includes a zar. It's not mitame bebeis abliya. Why? The animal was fine. The person was no good. So therefore, it follows the rule that Rabbi Yochanan holds of, and it doesn't create tuma when you swallow it. El Rav, but according to Rav, what's he including there? So okay, ulatamech. Still, if you're explaining it according to Rabbi Yochanan, the Mishnah is still difficult to understand. Shelo haya psulo bakodesh. What does it mean where it says a circumstance where its psul wasn't bakodesh, meaning it wasn't the service that was the problem, it was the animal that was the problem, then it is mitame bebeis abliya. So then, lasuyimai, what are you coming to include over there? Well, that we have no answer for, so therefore we have to come up with an answer to explain that. Well, once we're coming up with an answer to explain what that's excluding, then we can understand what kol is coming to include. And that is, Ella reisha lasuye shchitas kodshim bifnim. The beginning is coming to tell me that if I take kodshim, and I take a knife and I do shchita inside with a olas oaf, so that's a pasul korban. But it's not metame bebeis abliya, because shchita and shchita is okay. Seifa, the end of the Mishnah is coming, lasuye malikas chulin bachutz, to tell me that if I take chulin and I go outside, I take my bird and I have not consecrated it, and I do malika on it outside in the outside of the azara, so then that is going to be metame bebeis abliya, because that's malika, it's outside, and it's not going to help me. Okay, so Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Yochanan, we have a separate. So the Mishnah has its own explanation, doesn't prove one way or the other like Rav or like Rabbi Yochanan, but we have a brisa that proves like Rabbi Yochanan. Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Yochanan, brisa says like Rabbi Yochanan, Malka Zar, if a person who's a non-Kohen does the malika, Malka Puzzle, or somebody who is a balmum, a kohen who's a balmum, somebody who's puzzled to do the malika. Ha-pigol veha-nosar veha-tameh. If somebody has intention for pigol, somebody has intention either or nosar, or the person is tameh. So all of those, let's say for pigol, let's say the korban was pigol. Sorry, the korban was nosar, you left it over, or the korban became tameh. That's not going to create tumah when you swallow it. Now, that's a really kind of an interesting point, because nosar happens a day later after you've already done the malika. So what we're saying is there's no such thing as retroactive nevela. In other words, since this korban was fine when you did it, then you left it over, now the korban is not fine, now it's puzzle. That does not make your malika no good. And therefore, if you eat it now, it's not metame bebeis abliya. If you eat nosar of birds, it's going to be an avera, can't eat nosar, but it's not going to make you tame bebeis abliya, because the malika is still valid. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak says, on the topic, since we're talking about who can do malika, who can't do malika, and tuma, and all that sort of thing, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Shemati Shtayim. I heard two teachings. Achas kemitzas zar, v'achas malikas zar. I heard something about if a non-Kohen does kemitza, right? That's where he scoops up the scoop of the meal offering. And the other teaching was about a non-Kohen who does malika on a bird. And then you take that kemitza or you take that bird and you put it on the mizbeach to burn up. So achas tered v'achas lo tered. One of them's got to come down. One of them does not come down. So which is which? Right? Is the kemitza, which is better, the kemitza or the malika? That's essentially the question. V'lo yadana. I didn't know which one comes down, which one doesn't.
Really?
Which way are you going to go? Yeah?
How can you say that? Of course, you can't do kemitza. I would say no way a non-Kohen can do that.
Okay. So you're going to say kemitza, no way a non-Kohen. But you're going to say it's like this holding like Rabbi Yochanan, that the zar is okay, right? The kemitza says no way a non-Kohen can do it.
Would you ever think that a non-Kohen can do kemitza?
Why would a non-Kohen be able to do malika?
Because that's like the shchita almost. That's the beginning.
Kemitza is also like shchita. Yeah, kemitza is the shchita of the mincha. But we learned that kemitza has to be done by a kohen, also malika has to be done by a kohen, so v'lo yadana. Amar Chizkiah. Chizkiah says, mistavra kemitza tered, right? He agrees with you. He says it makes more sense. The kemitza's got to come down. Malika lo tered, but not the malika. Maishna malika. Why the malika? Why not the malika? What's different? The yeshna bebama. Because you could do kemitza on a bama. Well, kemitza nami yeshna bebama. Kemitza also is done on a bama. And so by a non-Kohen. V'chi tema ein mincha bebama. Maybe your answer is, well, there were no minchas on bamas. Maybe that was not done. Maybe there were no minchas on bamas. So then eino fos nami babama. Then that rule would also apply. There would be no birds on bamas either. Why? Damar of Sheshis. Rav Sheshis says, "L'divrei ha'omer yesh mincha babama." There is an argument about whether there were mincha offerings during the times of bamas or not. So, according to the opinion that says there was a mincha on a bama, yesh ofos b'bama, birds follow the same rule. L'divrei omer ein mincha ein ofos. The one who says there were no minchas says there were no birds. So that doesn't. You're not going to make a distinction there because after all, my taima. What's the reason? Because Zevachim velo minach. Because the pasuk says Zevachim, right? The pasuk is talking about Shmos. It says Vayishlach es na'arei bnei Yisrael vayalu olos vayizbechu Zevachim shlamim la'Hashem parim. They made these korbanos that were not in the area of the Beis Hamikdash, and they did them as Zevachim, which are animal sacrifices. So Zevachim means to exclude velo menachos, Zevachim velo ofos. Zevachim are animal sacrifices. That comes to exclude mincha offerings or bird offerings. Ella, so rather, Ema ein kiddush beklishares bemincha bebama. The answer is what we mean to say is that there was no sanctifying, there's no holy utensils by bamas. So they didn't take the kmitza and put it into a holy sanctified utensil and bring that up onto the mizbeach. Therefore, if you had a non-Kohen do this service, there was no corresponding acceptable service by mincha in a bama, because they would never have put it into a klishares from a non-Kohen. So therefore it goes up, it comes down, that's no good. Fine. Moloch.
We still don't know. He doesn't know. Yitzchak still doesn't know.
No, now we know, right? He doesn't quite know, but Chizkiah said, makes sense, right? Kmitza is the one that there's, the way that it was done by Bamos is not the way we do it now. Therefore, there was never a circumstance where a Zar was able to take the kmitza, put it into a klisharis, and burn it on the mizbeach. Therefore, it's got to come down. Malak bismol obalayla. Next part of Mishnah was he does malika with his left hand or at night. Tana Rabbanon. Yochote malika she lifnim mitama begodim bebeis habliya. You might have thought that if the malika is done inside the azara, right, then it would create tuma bebeis habliya, like any other nevela. Talmud lomar. Therefore, the pasuk says nevela, right? It becomes nevela. The pasuk is in Vayikra. V'chol nefesh asher tochal nevela utrefa be'ezrach beger. Any person who eats nevela or a trefa, who is a Jewish person or a converted person, he shall wash his clothing and go to the mikvah, and he's tamei until night and becomes tahor. Okay, so that pasuk is talking about the nevela of a bird. So a nevela of a behema is tamei b'mago masa, we said, right? If you touch it or if you lift it or you carry it, right? So then that's a nevela by a kosher animal. That's going to be different. So the pasuk is telling us that a bird is only tamei when you eat it, right? That's what this pasuk is telling us.
How could a bird be tummy if you eat it?
Sorry?
How could a bird be tummy if you eat it if there's no room?
Well, it becomes tummy when you eat it, right? You become tummy when you eat it, right? Because it's nevela, wasn't shechted. You eat non-kosher chicken, and you become tummy. Okay? So, the Gemara says, okay, so how do I know? Why would I not know that if the malika is done and it becomes pasul, so then why wouldn't that become tummy? Hanami nevelahi. This bird is also nevela, right? So therefore, I need a source to be able to know why this pasul korban isn't nevela. So the answer is elatam trefa. So therefore, the answer is because you're going to change the brisa a little bit, and we're going to say that the source is the word trefa, the next word in the pasuk, right? So the pasuk is not saying that a trefa creates tuma, because the Gemara is going to say on Amud Beis that a trefa isn't tamei, right? Trefa, an animal that's shechted, that is treif. That treif, what does trefa mean? Trefa means that it has a severe enough injury that the animal would have died on its own in short order. For example, holes in its lungs is the classic one. That's the trefa, right? So if it has abrasions or holes on its lungs, so then that animal is trefa. That's not nevela, and it's not metame. So therefore, why does the pasuk say trefa? So the answer is trefa she'ein materes esa iser. So it means to say that the trefos the shchita in this case is not going to remove the prohibition. So therefore, right, because it's a treifa. So once you shecht it, it becomes a treifa now. It's still usr. So af kol she'ein materes es ha'isr. So too, the nevela of a kosher bird is mitame bebeis habliya, becomes tame when you swallow it, when there's no other prohibition is not permitted through its nevela. I mean, it's a shum isser. So, for example, yotza malika, so that'll exclude malika, shehi lifnim, right? It's inside of the Beis Hamikdash, and hoel v'hi materes es ha'isser, it's going to permit, that malika is going to be a valid thing, because that malika is going to permit you to bring it to the mizbeach, so, meaning, because even if it goes up, it doesn't come down, because the malika, because even though the bird is puzzle, we said it's going to still be eligible to be brought up in this mizbeach and not come down, which means it's going to remove the prohibition of bringing you can't burn a live bird on the mizbeach. But this puzzle bird, you can burn on the mizbeach, which means the malika does something. So since the malika does something, so therefore, ein mitame begadim bebeis habliya. Therefore, the bird, once you do malika, although it's going to be puzzle, it still doesn't become nevela, and it doesn't create tuma. So hevi hamolek kodshim bachutz. However, a bird that is kodesh, right? It's a holy bird that is outside of the azara, where the malika isn't going to do anything for it, because you can't do malika except in the Beis Hamikdash, inside the not the Beis Hamikdash, in the courtyard of Beis Hamikdash, or molek chulin bein mi befnim bein mi bachutz. You do malika on non-korban birds, and then malika does nothing for that as well. So then, hol ve'ein matir nesa iser, since malika is ineffective at all, so then it's going to make it so that you're still tummy. From the word treifa, essentially, what we're saying is that since the word treifa is telling us that the malika has to have some function, if the action that you're taking, the malika action that you're taking, effectively accomplishes nothing, the bird is just as prohibited as it was before you did malika, then it's nevela. It's just like a treifa, so it's the same thing. It's still prohibited. You can't use it, right? So, like we said, this bird wasn't a sacrifice. You did malika on it. Well, you couldn't burn it on the mizbeach. Now you still can't burn it on the mizbeach. It's not a sacrifice. So therefore, it did nothing for you. Therefore, it creates tuma. However, if your malika did something, right? You had an animal that you did it at nighttime, right? So, and the bird doing it at night, the bird is puzzle. But if I put it on the mizbeach, I wouldn't have to take it down. Well, I've done something. It's done. The malika has had some effect. Once the malika has some effect, it also removes the tumah. Okay, that's the source. Tanya idach. Okay, so now we have another brisa that is going to also teach us some other rules about Tumas Beis Habliya, since we love it so much. Tadidach. Yochol tehei shchitas chulin lifnim kodshim bein mi mefnim bein b'chutz mitama Beis Habliya. We might have thought that if you took a knife and you did regular shchita on a chulin animal inside of the azara, or you did kodshim, right? You took an animal and you did kodshim, bein mi b'fnim bein b'chutz, whether you did it inside the azara or outside, you might think now it's mitame bebeis habliya because the animal is puzzle. It's a puzzle korban. You can't. So maybe it creates tuma. Therefore, tamad lomar. Therefore, it says nevela. It says it has to be nevela. This animal, once you do shchita, it's not nevela. Or also a bird that's kodshim, if you do malika with it, it may become puzzle if you did it in the wrong place, but it's not nevela. So therefore, there's no tumah by those circumstances. So the Gemara wants to know, ha nami nevela hi. So 1 second, this bird that's puzzle, why are we not calling it nevela? So the answer is Ella Talmud Lomar Treifa. Rather, we've got to explain the brisa as we did before. We're going to take a look at the word Treifa. Ma Treifa Shava Bifnim Kebachutz. Just like Treifa, the prohibition is both inside of the Beis Hamikdash courtyard and outside. Right? It's going to be if the animal became a Treifa inside or outside, it's going to be prohibited for being for a korban. Afkol Shavos Bifnim Kebachutz. So too, the only way for something to become Metame Bebeis Abliya is if the prohibited action would be prohibited both inside the courtyard and outside. Yotza Shchitas Chulin Bifnim. So therefore, these two examples, Shchita of a non-sacrificial animal inside the Beis Hamikdash is not, it's a psul, but it's not Metame Bebeis Abliya. Why? Because Shchita of Chulin outside the Beis Hamikdash, we call that lunch. And that's fine. Right, so that's okay. And kodshim bein bifnim bein mi bachutz ho velo shavu bifnim kabachutz. So too, when you do malika on kodshim on a sacrifice, both inside the azara and outside, the reason why that's not mitame is because you're supposed to kodshim with malika inside the base, inside the azara. That's where it's supposed to go. So that's not ruined. So therefore, a mitame begodim beis abliya. Therefore, that price is saying that's why it doesn't create tuma beis abliya. Different reason, slightly, but also same effect. Okay. So bishlama chulin lo shavu bifnim kebachutz. Fine. I understand what you're saying in explaining this brisa that shchita, right, by chulin is not the same inside the azara and outside. Outside, the meat is fine. Inside the Beis Hamikdash, it's possible. Different laws. Therefore, though, it doesn't create tuma bebeis abliya. Ela kodshim, but when it comes to kodshim, right, so we don't understand, right, because why is it not the same? Idi ve'idi psulin minhu. So both of these circumstances, right, whether you do kodshim, when it comes to kodshim, whether you do shchita, this is not malik on it, you do shchita on it inside the azara, or you do shchita on outside of it on the azara, either way it becomes possible. It's the same law. Right? Again, I take an ola bird and I take a knife and I do shchita on it. It does not matter where I do shchita with that knife, that is not a korban. It's possible. Therefore, the rule is the same, inside and outside. Therefore, your saying should be, it should be metame bebeis abliya. Why? Because the rule is the same, both inside and outside. Amar Rava says, Im hoa lo shchitas chut lechayvo kares. So he says, well, the logic is like this. If slaughtering it outside of the azara would create a prohibition which would make you chayav kares, right? The pasuk says in Vayikra Yud Zayin, Ish mi beis Yisrael, if a Jewish person comes, asher yishchat shuro kasef o eiz b'machaneh, who slaughters a ox, a sheep, or a goat in the camp, or asher yishchat michutz l'machaneh, he slaughters it outside the camp, vel pesach ol moed lo hivio, and he doesn't bring this sacrifice to the ol moed, right? So now we know it's supposed to be a korban, and he's shachting it outside of the ol moed, out in the camp. The pasuk says, "V'nichras ha'ishahu mikerav amo," person gets kares. So shchitas chutz, if you take a korban and you slaughter it outside of the Beis Hamikdash, outside of the Beis Hamikdash courtyard, punishment is kares. So lo toil lo l'tahara midei nevela. That is not going to remove it from nevela because the prohibition there is very severe. So therefore, ashkechan bifnim. So ashkechan. 1 second. So ashkechan b'chutz. Sorry, I skipped the word. Ashkechan b'chutz. So I understand why you're going to get. It's going to create tuma outside if you slaughter this bird outside. Why? Because it's a very severe prohibition. You get kares for it. But bifnim minolan. Why is it that you still get that? Why it's not metame? Why is it metame bebeis abliya inside as well? Hoil velo shavu bifnim kibachutz. The answer is because now the rules are not the same, right? Outside, if he does it outside, it's not metame, but inside it is metame. So therefore,
can't change even one letter from Torah. That's a mistake.
So therefore, inside it is not metame. I don't know if I just made that make sense. 1 second. So misvarzu tar of kachim she's bechutz lazara. Why is it tahar?
Where's the Rahman? You know it. It's not just Jewish.
Are we saying? Are we saying?
Okay, so he's saying that since the prohibition outside the camp is very severe, is a kares prohibition, so therefore it's not going to be metame you bebeis habliya. From the pasuk says, "O asher yishchat." That's what it says from the extra pasuk, which basically we're going to learn this limud on Daf Kuf Zayin. He says here, so we'll get to that drush over there. But so it's considered to be shchita as far as removing the tumah of beis habliya. So why would it's going to create a avera of kares, which means that if it is a significant enough shchita to create the avera of kares, so then it must be significant enough of a shchita to remove the isser of nevela, right? If it's a shchita has an effect, so therefore the shchita has an effect, it's going to remove its nevela. So, but bifnim now we say that since the rules are different, bifnim and bachutz you get kares by bifnim, it's not the same halacha, so therefore it's also not metame bebeis habliya. Okay, now, ihachi, the Gemara wants to know, if that's the case, that by tumas beis habliya, right, that they have to be, outside and inside have to be the same in order to create tumas beis habliya, mala kachim bachutz nami lo. So then if you do malika on kachim outside of the azara, also you shouldn't create tumah bebeis habliya. Why? Delo shavu bifnim kebachutz. Because they're not the same rule outside and inside. Because inside, there's no tumah, because inside it's kosher korban, which means that outside it's a different halacha, it's not kosher korban, which means that there should be no tumah bebeis habliya. Amar Rav Shimi Barashi says, "Danin davar shelo behechshero, midavar shelo behechshero, ve'edamin davar shelo behechshero, midavar behechshero." He says, look, we're going to compare a bird which is of kachim, a Kodesh bird, which was shechted inside, which is not done properly, from another type of bird that is also not done properly, of kachim shenitcha, which was shechted outside of the azara. We'll say those two laws are the same. Just like outside it isn't metame bebeis habliya, so to inside it's not metame bebeis habliya, because both were not done properly. But you can't say that if a bird was done 100% appropriately, therefore it doesn't create tumah, that's the same rule by when the bird is not done properly. It could very well be that when the bird is done properly, it doesn't create tumah, but when the bird is done improperly, it does create tumah. So that's not going to be a proof. So, so he says, is that true? Is that true? We don't ever learn something which is kosher over to something that's not kosher? I'll show you a circumstance we do. That time we're in a brisa. Minayin liyotze she'im Allah lo yered. Remember we had mentioned previously that if a meat goes outside of the azara, if you put it up on the mizbeach, it doesn't come down. How do you know that? Because Shaharei Yotze B'Bama, kosher B'Bama, because we learned that it was kosher B'Bama. Well, by B'Bama it was kosher. Out of the Azara, it's not kosher. So we're learning that meat that is not kosher outside the Azara can still go up on the Mizbeach. From where? From doing it kosher by a B'Bama. So the answer is, no, we already answered that. Tana Azos Torah Sa'ola Riba Samichlei. They're not really learning it from the B'Bama, they were really learning it from that pasuk, not from the B'Bama. So that was only a hint. So that's not a concern to us.
Can't learn from Bamas.
Can't learn Bamas. Correct. That's the rule. Cannot learn from Bamas. We will pick up from the Mishnah tomorrow.
Beautiful. Go ahead. And what, today is 70.